Welcome to our presentation titled A QA Journey to DevOps, From the Dark Ages to the Renaissance of Testing, featuring Todd DeCapua and Clint Sprauve. I'm your host, Josiah Renaudin. Before we begin, I'd like to explain how to participate in today's event. You'll be watching streaming video and content. To optimize bandwidth, please be sure to close out any unnecessary applications in the background. You will notice a number of widgets at the bottom of your console. Here you may view the speaker bio and presentation abstract. Loving the presentation? Send a tweet to our Twitter feed. Also, please send us your feedback about the presentation via our short 4-question survey. To submit a question, use the moderated chat function. We will answer any technical questions within the chat, and we'll try to get to each of your questions for the speaker during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. And now, our speakers are taking the stage.
Okay.
All
right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. My name is Clint Sprauve. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Functional Testing, and I have with me today Todd DeCapua. Todd, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Todd DeCapua with HP as well. I'm a Chief Technology Evangelist. So, again, Clint and I are going to present some pretty fun slides for you today. We'd like to have a discussion. We've got plenty of time, we think, at the end for a Q&A. So, Clint, I'll hand it back over to you if you want to jump in.
All right, appreciate it. So, at the end, definitely feel free to ask a lot of questions. So, this is a topic that we've been experiencing internally for several years now, is that transition to DevOps. And I'm sure like many of you, either here in the audience or in virtual worldwide internet land, have been experienced as well. So, what we've noticed is that especially with quality assurance and those that have testing as their profession, the transition to DevOps has been very challenging, right? Because it's this new term that has popped up. And for a lot of those that are in traditional testing roles, so even those that have been going through an agile transformation, it's been very difficult to understand how do you apply DevOps and what does that mean to me from a career perspective? And what exactly does it mean for different types of organizations? So what we're going to do today is we want to talk about 3 key areas. We want to talk about the why of DevOps, the how of DevOps, as well as the what. So the why, we want to find out, okay, DevOps definitely presents a great opportunity for a lot of organizations. And it's also a good opportunity for those testers to be able to expand their skill sets in terms of what do they need to do in terms of how do I enhance it in this new realm of DevOps. And what does that mean? Does that mean that if I'm non-technical, I have to be more technical? So we're going to explore some of those areas and what that means. We're also going to talk about the what, the new processes and skills that are necessary for quality. How can you use exactly what you have today, that existing skill set within your organization? And then the how. We have a couple of case studies that we want to talk about in terms of our internal challenges with transitioning to DevOps, going from an agile transformation to a pure DevOps transformation in certain projects within the HP software organization. And Todd and I have both been key parts of these transformations internally. One of the things I always like to point out when we talk about DevOps and that transformation, it doesn't just affect R&D, it doesn't affect just quality, it affects all aspects of the business. So there are other areas that can be a bottleneck when you're trying to make this transition. So we want to give you some ideas in terms of what we've done internally and a few case studies of what's done with our R&D teams. So let's look at the why. So DevOps, as you know, is a transformation. And with DevOps, you know, and everyone, you've seen this chart before, and this triangle has been around for years and years. And if you've been attending either the STARWEST or the STARWEST conferences, you've had someone present this same view for you. So with DevOps, it's really more about the process. And this is where many organizations that I've worked with, consulted with, sold software to, this is where they've struggled a lot because they get caught up in terms of how they've done it in the past, right? This is how we've done testing. This is how we log defects. And now that we're agile, this is how we're implementing agile. We're basically implementing Scrum. We're implementing Kanban. So it's really about the process itself. So, but with DevOps, the biggest challenge is that there is no one true authority, right? So there's basically input from different parts of the organization, from the developers, from the testers, from the business side, as well as the operations. The other thing that makes DevOps somewhat complex is it's going to vary depending on the type of software or the type of organization that you work in. So for example, if you're with a large manufacturing company, DevOps is going to mean something to you than if you're a pure software development shop, where your view of operations is really the releasing that application in a timely manner, but not necessarily where it's dealing with any part of heavy regulations and things of that nature from a DevOps perspective. Also, there is no one right way, and this is something we're going to talk about as well, and we'll talk about some of the challenges that we even had internally at HP, right? Because there really isn't a cookie-cutter approach to DevOps. You really have to make it fit your organization in a way that makes sense, right? So what works for company A is not going to work for company B. You really have to experiment and understand what is going to work, especially when you're talking about the various skill sets, those different organizations. If you're still broken up into different groups or organizations, separate QA organizations, how can you implement that within your DevOps process to where it's going to make sense to your organization? So the good news, we talk about this, we talk about the challenges, is that quality is still central to DevOps. It always has been, right? So quality hasn't left. So you may hear this throughout the conference through different speakers that you must change everything that you're doing from a testing perspective. You got to step up. You got to start coding. You got to do these different things. No, you have to figure out ways to make sure that it works within your organization. So we're going to dispel the myth that quality, and when I say quality in terms of your current skill set or the skill set of your team, goes away when you implement a DevOps process. So the goal of this presentation is to dispel those myths.
So this has got to be my favorite slide, because I am an old QA testing guy. I mean, I was responsible for one of the larger testing organizations in financial services, and I did the Agile transformation. I did the DevOps transformation. I had people, in my teams that were worried, hey, I'm going to lose my job. This is what I've always done. But this slide, this image, hopefully it's burned into everybody's head. The idea is these two fish are in a fishbowl. It's the dev team and the ops team, and quality is the water. It's our job as quality professionals to ensure that what we're delivering to our end users is at highest level of quality. So, again, I've seen a lot of different illustrations, and I hate to be too philosophical on things, but I don't know. We feel strongly that, again, we're dispelling that myth, and this picture is really what helps me connect the dots and say, yeah, that's what I'm about as a quality guy.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because when you look at this picture, you got the one fish that's dev, the other fish that's ops. What's really key about this, and you probably experienced this in your organization, most teams or most leadership's view of DevOps is going to be dependent upon which side that they fall on. So, for example, if you come from that dev and that quality side, you're going to have more of a dev view of DevOps than those that come from the operations side that work with project and portfolio management and kind of the production releases. So their view of DevOps is going to be a more ops-centric view. So, and this is the other reason we talk about how DevOps can't be cookie cutter, and you really have to evaluate it from your organization and how you're structured. Again, because there's going to be so many different ways of implementing DevOps from so many different views. So what I'm going to do now, I want to hand it over to Todd so he can tell you about the what of DevOps.
Cool. So I'm going to move quick. Everything that I'm going to talk about is really going to be organized in 5 different things. So it's almost, you consider it like the top 5 list. So this is what we're looking at. So again, the idea of quality within DevOps. How does it all work? What are these top 5 things that us as QA professionals should be thinking? Right now, ultimately, I want to arm you with what you can take back. So defining that what. So starting with the culture change. Is anybody doing an Agile DevOps thing right now? All right, so we got a handful of people in the room that are doing this. It starts with this culture change. I love the image of Henry Ford's assembly line because, again, we changed the way the cars were being built. It's a long-time story. I also love the quote from Henry Ford on this slide. But what I want to make you aware of is it's going to change. In the 3 transformations I've had the opportunity to participate in, it is not for everyone. I've typically seen a 10 to 15% attrition rate. So again, if you're not comfortable in these environments and what the transformation that's going on and that culture, just know about it, know it's coming. I'm going to encourage you to be a part and figure out how you can unite within that team. And again, just remember, you're that water in the fishbowl. It's up to you to make sure that these teams are delivering that high quality. Again, another image that I love, I mean, this is that quality throughout. So to me, there's some things that I look at in nature and I go, it's amazing how perfect that is. This is one of those. So that drip coming into the water and how the ripples are perfectly even as it goes across. How does surface tension work that way? Again, there's a lot of different ways that we could look at that analogy, but again, how are you working with the developers? I just had a conversation on the showroom floor. They're working within an IDE. I don't care if it's Eclipse or TFS or whatever, but how is it that you're bringing quality to their desktop? How are you making it simple for them to see these results? How are you integrating it with their automation, with your automation? How do you report on the results? Again, you're the one who's still accountable for quality. How is it you're able to integrate that throughout this process that's changing? Testing constantly. Have we heard this? You know, I almost get sick of hearing it when I'm at a bar, or I guess I shouldn't say a bar, but, you know, and people tell me, well, how many builds a day do you do? You know, really, are we having this conversation? What's the quality of the build that you're delivering? You know, how is it you've built quality gates into this automated delivery cycle so that you know that before it actually gets to that next stage, that you're making sure that whatever you're delivering to that next individual is actually of high quality? You could be doing 200 builds an hour. I don't care. Are they crap? Okay. What gets passed along? But again, how is it that you can test constantly? Again, I don't know if there's sailors in the room. I grew up as a sailor, and there's things that are constantly going on the boat. The water's changing, the winds are changing, the sails are changing, people are flying everywhere. So that's the analogy that I guess I first look at. We talk about a quality trifecta. So this is bringing in pieces of functional, performance, security. You can keep going down through the list, but when we think about what is quality, it might change a little bit. Maybe you grew up as a functional tester. Maybe you grew up as an automated tester. But how is it you can broaden your view to help, again, this testing constantly piece? Being able to relentlessly automate can be very scary for people. You know, what frameworks are we using? What tools are we using? Kind of push that to the side for a second. What is it that you can do to, again, build this in, relentlessly automating everything that's being done? Because, again, when you're delivering those 200 builds a day, let's make sure that they're with quality. How long does it take your regression suite to run? Is there a way that you can shorten it down? You know, I had regression suites that would run for performance in 15 minutes. I knew that it covered all the critical components, that if that did not pass, my bank was either going to be in regulatory trouble or we were not going to be able to run. So, again, thinking about this relentless automation. Creating visibility. I love this picture. I was an ice hockey player in college. You know, nothing like looking at the scoreboard. But how is it that we as quality professionals can visualize these results? So as we're doing all these different pieces, how can you help the organization to see through this, what I call information radiator, some sort of a dashboard that shows them, here's how we're doing. We're getting better, we're getting worse. You know, are there certain, again, I talked a little bit about quality gates. But what are those pieces that we want to talk about? Making it a seamless communication is important. Who are your stakeholders? What's the business think about this? What's the technology organization think about this? What do your end users think about it? I mean, how many of you guys today are out talking to your end users? Again, a couple, more than half. The last piece I'll mention on here is those constraints that slow you down from being able to connect the different tools. There's a lot of integrations that are out there and available. Many of them are free today. So it might just be looking at, hey, here's the process that's changed. Here's how we're integrating these different bits together. Start with it manually. I mean, we all hate Excel. We all hate whiteboards. But start with it manually. You know, see what works well. See what the team picks up and says, hey, I really think that metric is important. You know, how do you then build that into a dashboard and make it automated? So these are, you know, some of the framework pieces that I tend to talk about. Again, these slides, this recording, it's all going to be available online for you later. But this one simple framework, it talks about things like orchestrate, automate, transforming. These are really 3 simple steps that you can think about along the way. I've added some narratives to help you be able to take this and then articulate it out. And you can see along the top is that application development piece, and along the bottom is IT operations. So in the middle is kind of where that DevOps bit's happening. All this, though, is kind of centered around these top 5 points that we've talked about. So I know you want to talk a little bit more about how, and what Clint and I have done is we've taken this case study from an HP software perspective and laid it into these 5 points that we've just talked about. So it's one thing, I think, for Todd and Clint to stand up here and talk to you guys about, hey, here's the best practice or proven practices and how you could be doing things and things to think about as a quality professional. But I'm now going to show you how we've done it at HP Software related to each one of those 5 points. So should I get started?
Yeah.
All right. So again, here's how we did it. And we're talking about quality within DevOps. So number 1, we said it starts with a culture change. So I love to ask this question. So you guys want to transform to Agile, you want to transform to DevOps. Why? Not enough people are asking that question. But the why within the HP software team was productivity. So, we said we need to improve the productivity of the team. Okay, well, why was that? And then you can see here the 5 bullets in the middle. So this development environment. And again, we're now quality-minded people coming in and saying, this culture change, how is it that we can help? Well, here's the pain that the developers are in. The first one is talking about unstable environments. They can easily be damaged. They're common for everyone. So again, anybody can go in and mess with that environment and take it down pretty quickly. Operational costs are very high. They're probably physical environments. These were physical environments. And unexpected behavior that are coming out of our development environments. Are these common things that you guys might be experiencing today? Okay, almost everybody is nodding their head yes. Well, we also wanted to enable teams to be able to work from anywhere. And again, I know depending on where you are, what your business is, this might be a little bit varied depending on what your security policies are. However, one of the big challenges that we had was latency was killing everyone's connection. So this is, this is probably the only technical thing I will talk about in this conversation today, but latency is the speed of light. And again, it's typically measured in milliseconds, so thousands of a second. You cannot go any faster than the speed of light yet, but what happens is when you take a laptop and you move away from a data center where this test environment is, you're introducing latency, and that causes delays. They can be quite significant. So again, these were the pains or the challenges and the catalyst to why this culture change needed to happen. But again, the first question that we, HP Software, asked, why are we changing? Productivity was what we were after. That enabled us to constantly focus, again, as a quality organization, well, how are we measuring productivity today? How are we showing how we're doing with productivity? Again, coming back to some of the basics. So, second, quality integrated throughout. It's a bit of an eye chart in the back, so you're at an advantage if you're joining us virtually. But what I wanted to simply show you, and I'm not going to go into the details, and then I'm going to hand it over to Clint to add any points I might have missed. If you needed to put a runway on DevOps, this is what it could look like for your organization. And if you wanted to say, well, Todd, help me understand, how does this look from a tools and a capabilities and everything else? So on the top is where you see more of the typical development type tools. Some of the open source products that you're probably all familiar with. And then down along the bottom, again, these are some more commercial-like tools, some developer tools. But again, these are probably products you're already familiar with. And the part that I loved about the slide that Clint covered first with the triangle is, really what we're talking about is changing the process. So as quality professionals, it's leveraging the same capabilities that you're used to, maybe just in a little bit different way. I know, Clint, you wanted to add a couple comments on this one.
Yeah, definitely. One of the key areas for me is that the biggest takeaway from this slide is really not about the tools, right? And that sounds kind of strange coming from a software vendor that it's not about the tools. And it's actually true, and we've learned this even in our own DevOps journey. It's really about using what fits best for your organization and your organization's skill set and the skill set that you need to hire for. That makes the big difference. What you don't want to do is try to put a square peg in a round hole. You want to make sure that you're utilizing and basically capitalizing on the strengths of your team, whether they're very technical or non-technical. So what I want to do is give you some examples of what we've run into in terms of how we've been able to implement this in different areas within the entire HP software organization, which is extremely big. So Todd and I, we spend a lot of time on the plane. We go to our R&D facility over in Israel. So we work with the entire application development management portfolio at HP. So we've seen the evolution in terms of how we're implementing not only from agile transformation, but from a DevOps transformation. So one of the areas I want to talk about is, you've probably heard that, especially when you move to DevOps, everyone needs to be technical. So I'm going to give you one case study of a particular group within the R&D team that actually created their own group called the Dev Test Team. And they have a Dev Test Manager. That was because of the technical nature of the product. So one of the key components was this, is in terms of how we were organized from a dev test perspective. Their view was that when they created this dev test team to actually implement this for one of our latest load testing solutions, was how can we implement a pure DevOps solution for our SaaS implementation. Again, as a company, SaaS was fairly new to HP for the past 5 years in the ADM space. So how can we make sure that we deliver the best quality applications possible for this new SaaS application? So one of the managers decided, let's create a dev test team, meaning developer slash tester. They're very technical. So what we've done is, their view was, with this organization, dev and QA, they're one team, right? So everyone has the same responsibility in terms of bug fixes, building test automation. And the goal was to make sure that we create automation from day one, right? So we took a test-driven development approach. And the team was allowed to choose a mixture of tools, where they want to use internal HP tools to implement this process, or even external and open source tools. And I'll actually show you what tools and products were actually used in that. Manual testing within this group is still essential. So I want you guys to remember that even within DevOps, manual testing is still essential, right? Even though you want to automate as much as possible, you still need those testers to do exploratory testing, to be able to find things. You need usability, right? So there's still that wisdom of the crowd that you need for testing your application. So manual testing, regardless of how much automation, still doesn't go away. And even in DevOps, we need to make sure that we keep that. The other thing is that there are no more deliveries to QA, right? And I'm not talking in the traditional waterfall, toss it over the fence, but even in that sense of, with Kanban, moving it to a QA phase. There are no more deliveries to QA. This dev test team is an integral part in terms of how that software is tested on a regular basis. Every time there is a change made, that software is checked in, it goes through a build process. When it goes through that build process, it goes through these gates. So it goes through a security check, it goes through a functional check, it goes through a performance check, each of those. So it's basically ingrained into the entire DevOps quality process. So when you think about DevOps, think of it as just an extension of your agile transformation journey that you've been currently on probably for the last 3 to 5 years. So another thing with this team is that they had additional responsibilities. And this is key, because when we start talking about those skill sets, those developer skill sets, and some of those soft skills. So what this team is actually responsible for doing is not only with the functional performance, regression, security testing, they're also now responsible for helping with support tickets. They work with the sales teams. They work with customers directly. So their role and their job experience has expanded. Now, if you think about what you have in your organization, maybe you have the subject matter experts or your business analysts, or those that know the business better than anyone else. This is where, in a DevOps environment, they can actually contribute, and this is exactly what our team was able to do. They also contributed to the build, to the continuous integration and continuous delivery infrastructure. They are a key part of that. They're also responsible for even doing some of the bug fixes. And the best thing about it is when a customer calls in for support, they may go through support level 1. When it gets to R&D, this team is equipped to be able to handle, answer those questions, even come up with a fix and submit those into production. So it's a very efficient process that they've developed. And also, they're responsible for training internal teams as well. So there are other pockets and other product groups that are still trying to understand how can we do this within our product. So as they perfect what they're doing from a DevOps perspective, from a dev test, manual testing, how can those skills transition to these other projects? And the best thing about it is that even if they decide that they want to go to a different product, they don't have to be interviewed internally, so to speak. Because of that experience, it's an easy transition for resources to go across the different projects. So again, you're reducing that delay, you're keeping that efficiency, you're building up those skill sets. Now again, as I talked about before, this is not a cookie cutter approach. It's really going to depend on the level of complexity of the application under test or the project that you're working on and the skill set of your team. There is no cookie cutter approach. For this is a very complex application. It's a load testing product, right? So you're talking about a very complex application going through a continuous delivery, continuous integration process. Let me go back one. Actually, I'm going to pass it back over to you, and Perfect. Then what we're going to get into is exactly some of the metrics behind, once we get into the how later on, in terms of what they were able to do. What does that regression system look like for the team? What tools did they implement, commercial and open source? So for that, I'm just going to pass it over to you so you can tell about another case study within the HP software portfolio.
So number 3 is test constantly. So coming back to what does that mean? And again, if you remember in this study, what we're thinking about is productivity. So being able to focus on productivity, what does that mean? These are some of the results that we saw. You can see I did leave the name of the product in on this example. So this was for Service Anywhere. But you can see with the previous release, which is to the left, so 3.3, and then our next release, which it was a dot release, going out to 3.4. But here's the differences. So as you think about productivity, how is it that these types of results, and you can see there's incremental improvements, some of these quite significant. Platforms is something that we've heard from our customers is critically important. So where in our previous release we only had 40 platform tests, we actually had 70 on the next release. And then from a productivity perspective, that helped us because we're able to automate many of these. And you can see that at the end of each day, we were able to run 13,000 automated functional tests. And again, I come back and, well, what's the quality of each one of these? I don't care if it's 13,000 or 13. Let's make sure they're the highest quality and we're getting the value out that we need. But again, these are the metrics that that HP software with Service Anywhere in this release that we were measuring. You can see the difference being quite significant. Again, always coming back to that focus on productivity. That's why we're doing this. Relentlessly automating. So, how is it that we do this in this example? So you can see I'm kind of showing there's 3 different elements. So all the way on the left is ALM, in the middle is Jenkins, and then off to the right is Codar. These may be some terms you are familiar with or are not familiar with. But what I wanted to show you is how this build, deploy, test process, and in Clint's example of talking about how we have this dev test team that's all sitting together, they're all responsible for these elements. But using these 3 different product sets or sets of capabilities, this is how the team integrated in with ALM and Jenkins and Codar to set up their CI/CD process. Again, what were the reasons for it? Again, we can talk about the 3 bullets that you can read here, but my goal is to simply show you this is how we built quality into DevOps with this one project. So if you can't figure it out already, I'm going to hand it back to Clint because he has a parallel case study that we're also talking about, and this is where he's going to get into more of the details about some of these specific products, more so on the open source side and how they were leveraged.
So imagine sitting in a room with your R&D team and your product managers, and you're told that you can pretty much choose any tool that you'd like to work with to build your DevOps strategy. Now, imagine that you're the team that's actually building tools that are being sold for quality assurance, test automation, and performance testing. So you can imagine the challenge that these guys have. And this is one thing I love about working with our R&D team is that they're extremely sharp and they were also up to the challenge. So they looked at this as how can we use the best of breed internally and externally, and how can we bridge that gap, bring them together, and learn from where we're deficient and where we can improve in areas where we need to accelerate. So one example that we have here from a DevOps perspective is test automation coverage and distribution. So for this particular performance testing solution, with that dev test team that we talked about, they can do a full regression test or continuous test for a build that will take about maybe 25 minutes to run. And this is how they've actually segregated the actual types of testing that they do within that DevOps paradigm. One, of course, is we looked at coverage on the client side and the back end, as well as the protocols and regions for performance testing. How many of you guys do performance testing in your organization or are responsible for it? Yep, pretty much everybody, right? So if we look at, when we look at DevOps, it kind of challenges our old ways of thinking in terms of how we test software today. Right? How do we view defects? How do we view the coverage in certain areas? So as we talked about with dev test or with DevOps being a lot more technical, if you look here, the client, for testing on the client side, they've only automated 60% on the client side. Right? So they automated 60% of those items that are critical, and the percentage of active tests within each build. And those builds are pretty much run on an hourly basis. Then we look at the back-end tests, and the back-end tests have increased to 80%. Why? Because it's more back-end intensive. And they have about 306 active tests. Now, these are not the total tests across the board. You have tests in terms of integration with other components and other third-party products as well. And then, of course, for this particular product, the most important area was the protocols in the various regions for performance testing. So those tests are automated at 100%. And that's all protocols for all regions. So if you think about a cloud-based solution where you're doing distributed testing across the world, you want to make sure that you're covered across all those protocols. So this doesn't mean that each area one is more important than the other. It's where the emphasis lies in terms of when we release this application, what are the critical areas that we really need to focus on upon that release? Which ones are going to give us the most bang for our buck? We could automate everything on the client side, but we don't really need to, right? And this is what we talked about, the different skill sets that comes in with the manual testers as well, and being able to utilize that. Now, what you see at the bottom are the different types of open source tools that we use. We use an open source framework called Protractor, which helps you do AngularJS testing using Selenium to do some of the cross-browser testing as well. You've also implemented Mocha. And then, of course, being able to test on the Amazon and the Microsoft Azure cloud as well. So we've taken a combination of tools that we use internally for functional testing, our lean functional testing product, our ALM testing product, but implementing these tools to really help drive the efficiency and also improve our processes and our tools in terms of making them better and increasing their level of integration with open source and open systems across the board. So this is a very interesting case study for an organization that builds test tools to be able to take this and fully integrate it into that environment. So I'll pass it over to Todd. He's going to talk about how to create visibility and expand upon that topic.
I was hoping I was going to get this slide. So this is my most favorite thing to talk about with many people like you guys. So again, I'm an old QA testing guy. You know, I was a developer before I got into testing, which people find kind of amusing. But for me, it's all about the results. You know, and as you know, I had the opportunity to move through into more of a DevOps team. That's what all the developers wanted from me. Give me the results. Tell me what I need to fix at the code level because I've got my next build coming out, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of this hour, whatever that might be. So some of these things you may have seen before, you may have not seen. That might be too blurry for you at this point. But what I'm showing you is there's going to be two screenshots. So the one here on the left-hand side is accurately predict if a code commit is going to break the build. I mean, this is some of the magic and the secret sauce. But, you know, I was working with a very large media company, and they said, yeah, we want to do this. So this is inside of the Eclipse IDE. But you can see right here, you know, this commit has a 93% risk of breaking the build. Well, that's pretty interesting. As a developer, I mean, you're thinking about it, okay, do I want to make this commit? I'm now getting this predictive analytics coming back to me, fully automated, saying if you commit this, there's a 93% chance you're going to break the build. So I don't know if you guys have had the pleasure of sitting in a Agile or DevOps shop, but when a development team or dev test team breaks the build, that means you have to fix it. I've had the pleasure of having to walk down the street, and it was about 4 blocks from where my office was, but with a purple squirrel hat, and we pulled the developer out, Michael was his name, and put the hat on him. We walked him through the city all the way back to the office because we said, no, you're not going to lunch right now. You need to come back and fix this build. Well, he didn't know it. He didn't wait around for the build to kick off. He just went right to lunch. So now this is giving people like Michael the ability that before you click commit, hey, did you know that you got a 93% chance you're going to break the build? Pretty interesting. So this is called predictive analytics. But again, I want to make it visible to everybody. That's how you make it visible to people like your development teams. The other people, well, let me look at the release. What's going on in the release? So maybe this is your business stakeholder. Maybe it's your technology, the VP of apps, if you still have one of those. But they want to know, hey, this product that we're getting ready to push out, what are some of the key features? What are those key functions? What is the quality rating of these as we're getting ready for our release? Again, the release should no longer be an event. It should just be something that happens. You should have already tested it all the way through the life cycle. But again, this is how you can create and predict and plan for defects being introduced. I find this to be very cool stuff. Many of the people I have the opportunity to go talk to find it to be very cool stuff. Sometimes people have started down the path, how do I use some analysis tools like R? So maybe you can take a dump out of Quality Center or a dump out of your other test results and then pull it into R and kind of run some different analysis against it. This takes it up a whole nother level. Plus, what I love about it is it integrates it into your existing tool sets and makes it visible to all of your stakeholders in a fully automated way. So, what Clint and I wanted to highlight is, there were some key learnings that our teams had from an HP software perspective. This is what those are. So I can read through each of them, but many people, as they're sitting at the beginning of this, are like, man, this just seems like an impossible task. I'm going to be out of a job. My skills, I need to be refreshed. Do I need to learn how to code again? I mean, all those are great questions to be asking. I'm still slinging code. So don't be scared. Go do it. But DevOps is possible. Huge potential here for quality and speed. You have a key role in the quality and in the speed piece. Hopefully you've picked up a little bit on how you can do that. The culture changes when you incorporate DevOps. And I don't want to steal the thunder here. But again, I typically see about a 15% attrition rate. But what's normal for your organization? Is it 5%, 6%? So maybe it's a little bit higher. But quite honestly, embrace it. I've loved the fact that now everybody is embracing quality. I can be that change agent to help my organization. It's a great culture change. Discipline. Anybody in quality not like discipline? I mean, I think we're born for it. Yeah, I can follow a script. Yeah, I can write some code that follows in exact order. No problem. Automation and tools are important, but not everything. So you've heard Clint say it. You've heard myself say it. Leave the tools conversation out. Figure out what the challenge is. Figure out what are the results that people want to see. What are those metrics that are important to your organization? And then the odds are you probably already have the tools. You've already made the investment. You've already learned how to use. Name anyone that you want. Can you leverage the same capabilities already? Why reinvent the wheel? Why go out and make additional capital investments? There's no reason to waste time thinking about it. Communication, collaboration, and trust. This is one that keeps coming up. Again, I don't want to get too personal, but in any relationship that you're going to have, these are the key elements. Nothing is new in the workplace, thinking about Agile, thinking about DevOps. But you have to build that trust with your teams, you have to have collaboration, and you also have to communicate together. So I go back to the top 5. This is not the Dave Letterman top 5 or anything else. Did not put them in any order. But I think, as I think about, what are these key elements that I would want to share with you guys and have you walk away with as to, hey, how do we think about quality and DevOps? It's these 5 elements. Culture. Being able to integrate this quality piece throughout. Again, the fishbowl image is the one that comes in for me. How do we test constantly? Are you supporting that, testing constantly? Are you enabling the developers to help you build the test harness, and then you as the QA and testing professionals who know all the test data variables, who know all the positive and negative flows, going in and building those pieces into that framework? Relentlessly automating. What does it mean to you if you can see quality coming through every single time there's a build? What does it mean to your stakeholders? Does your VP of home loans have a higher value now for quality if they can see the results every single time? And lastly, creating that visibility. Have everybody feel accountable for quality. The piece I want to leave you with, learn more. There are a ton of resources that Clint and I have and everybody else in this conference to make them available to you. Here's a couple of the ones that I would highly encourage you to check out. I'm starting at the top. We've got the network virtualization trials. I have 6 trials on that website. Completely free. They're full solutions. You can download them and be using them today. The second one is the Lean FT product. So this is our Lean functional testing product. Again, go online, download it. You can start using it immediately. The next one is under Community Editions. So this was released on the 12th of August. Again, I get really excited about some things. This is one of them. So it's LoadRunner 12.50. So we just released this last month. The announcement still hasn't gone out yet. It's going to be going out within the next 2 weeks. But what you'll get here is you download LoadRunner 12.50. It has network virtualization built into it, and it's already licensed. So, I'm the guy who tested this working. It took me about 15, 20 minutes to download it to my local machine, get it up and running. There's a really simple little form you fill out. You put your name and your email in it. That's it. If you don't have rights to do it from your work machine, do it from your home or your phone laptop. Put it on there. Because what you get are 50 free virtual users for LoadRunner for the rest of your life. It's completely free. I mean, again, when I do my demos, this is what I use. So I just click that download and check it out. The last one that's up here is the NV Freemium. This is something I've had the opportunity to use for almost the last 10 years. This capability called network virtualization. It's a critical element that you need to think about, but what I wanted to do is make it really easy for everyone to try it now. So if you're sitting in front of your laptop now, if you're online with us virtually, just type in hp.com/go/NV Freemium, NVFREEMIUM, and hit enter. It'll take you less than 30 seconds to fill out the form and hit run test now. Within 5 minutes, you get an email to you with your customized 20-plus page results report for any URL or IP address that's publicly available. I've also put in there your ability to include your competitor's URL, so you can now run a comparison test. It becomes pretty interesting. So all of us as quality professionals, again, all I ask is you invest 30 seconds of your time. You get this fully customized report right to you. Not only does it show you how it's performing over 5 different network types, and all that by a transaction per second, it gives you a letter score. It also shows you a waterfall diagram of all the different objects on that one page. It shows you a letter score against 23 different performance criteria. And then also in those 23 criteria, what specifically you need to go in and fix at a code level right now to make that page load at least 40% faster. It's free, and it takes 30 seconds of your time. You can even do it from your mobile device. I'm not here to sell anything. I want you guys to have this as a results report you can now share with anybody in your organization and say, here's why quality in DevOps matters. And these are your results from your existing production application. So that's everything that Clint and I have prepared. We've got a few minutes for any questions that you may have. Yes, and I got a gentleman in the front. And if you can't get to the mic, I will repeat the question so everybody can hear it.
So are you doing continuous deployment? And if so, how frequently are you ending up deploying? How frequently do you deploy?
Cool. And I'm sorry, what was your first name?
Jerry.
So Jerry's question was, are we doing continuous deployment? And if so, what is the frequency of those deployments? So the answer to your question is yes. We are doing continuous deployments. It varies quite significantly across all the different product lines. So we still have, so there's products that Clint is watching after, things like unified functional testing. I don't know the frequency that you guys deploy. And are you talking production builds or just builds in general?
Actually, both.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you look at for different products for Stormwater Load, which is of course a SaaS product, they do pretty much hourly builds, and it's continuous. They have a full-blown DevOps implementation, so they implement directly into production once everything passes those quality gates. So once they make sure that with every build, a regression test is run, the unit tests are run, and then once it's pushed, so it can be blocked. But once it's you get all green light, so to speak, everything is then pushed to production. Now, for the other desktop products, it's a little bit different. Now, they still do the continuous build and the continuous delivery, but it's a different process in terms of when that's actually pushed out to the customers. And the reason that's different, if you think about a product like just any functional testing tool in general, your customers can't consume those changes as quickly, even if we were to push out a new release every day, every week to the website for them to download. Customers just don't consume software that way. So internally, yes, we do those continuous builds on a regular basis, on an hourly basis. They run through those quality gates. And then when it comes time to the full production, going through the full-blown security and compliance checks, and then we have a certain date that we'll release it to the general public for general consumption. So.
Yeah, for me as I was a previous HP customer for a long time, and I used to get a new release maybe once a year. Across most of our products, I'd say we're seeing a release normally once a quarter now.
Yeah.
Production, full gone release, at least a build a day across all teams is what I'm seeing today.
Yeah, and what you'll see as well is our patches are coming out a lot quicker now because of this new DevOps paradigm, because we can now push out patches a lot quicker rather than full-blown releases. So if there's some new functionality or new browser technology that we need to support, we can push that out through a service pack a lot quicker rather than waiting on a particular time frame to actually have that released.
Other questions? Yes. And if you speak up, I'll just repeat it. Yep. So McLaren, like the car. So McLaren's question is regarding the DevOps team, how big were our DevOps teams, or how big are our DevOps teams? So again, I think as you look at the different teams, it's how large are each one of the individual teams. So, on average, I'm thinking our teams are probably between 12 and 15 people.
Yeah, on average. Some are a lot bigger depending on the product and the legacy behind the products and the integrations that they have to support. But on average, it's about between 12.
And there may be multiple teams on a single product. So, again, if we had one of the larger products like a Load Runner Performance Center, Quality Center, those types of products, they're going to have multiple teams of those 12 to 15 per. Yep. Yep. So
All right, and that's going to wrap up this event, so thank you for joining us. Please check the presentation center for other presenters and their start times, and don't forget to join us for live interviews. Right now, Allison Wade is being interviewed, so check on over there.
Software company. We're actually the number 6 software company in the world.
Yeah, yes.
And how do we build that trust? Some of it is co-location. So again, the majority of our R&D teams do sit in Israel. So that helps with the trust. The other piece of it is, you would look at Clint and I as product owners and core stakeholders. So we do spend a lot of face time together. And not the FaceTime, but actually sitting in a room together and doing planning. So, for example, let's see, Monday this week, I was in a 5-hour planning session that was held in San Francisco. And so, again, these types of activities, building that trust level. The other thing that I always love within trust, and again, this is a non-HP thing, but when I've had the opportunity to do these transformations, is being able to, it's kind of that norming, high performing. So as you put this new team together, empowering them to do what they think they need to do to be able to deliver to this level of quality. But as a change agent, as a leader, you need to give them that freedom and let them, I know everybody talks about it, but let them fail. And even though you think, I've been accused of being too prescriptive sometimes because I'll walk into an organization and it's like, yeah, I've seen all this before. Here are the things that you need to do. I'll come back in 30 days. No, some of it is just that change and that communication that needs to happen over time. And again, the storming, the norming, and high-performing piece is very real.
Yeah, and I would say that to add to that is another thing that when you talk about this globally dispersed team, Todd and I spend a lot of time on the airplane, even though we work with different product groups, even though the majority of the R&D is based in Israel. We spend a lot of time. We go there at least 2 to 3 times a year to make sure we meet with the R&D teams, the PMs. We have offsites, so you still, depending on, we talk virtually, we do Skype, we do Microsoft Meeting, but you want to try to get the teams together so that you get that true, we talked about the FaceTime, working with them, understanding some of the limitations that R&D is going through, what's happening on the sales side, what's happening on the marketing side, but getting those teams together with some of the subject matter experts so that we can actually talk it out, develop those relationships. So even though, we're thousands of miles apart, we still try to make sure, and this has actually been mandated by our senior management, to make sure that we're not isolated from everything that's going on. So we work together. We've got great relationships with R&D and the PMs and everyone in our entire team. So that's really key to really implementing DevOps properly so that you're really unified and it's not just one group acting and everyone else just reacting. And
I know that we've run out of time, so I'm sorry. I'm going to have to thank everybody for participating. This has been great. Would love to spend some more time with you guys. If you can take a few minutes just to fill out the session evaluation, I know Clint and I would appreciate the feedback. Also, we do have a booth set up. It's as soon as you walk in on the right-hand side. But I'm happy to field any additional questions that you have. If you do get to the booth, we've got a really cool game that you can play. It's with Google Cardboard, and it's a virtual reality game. If you score 5 stars in your race, you're entered to win a leather jacket, just like the one that's on the main page here. But again, on behalf of everybody, thank you guys very much for participating. Let me know if you have any other questions.
yeah, thank you.
All right, that wraps up this event. We just mentioned the interview with Allison Wade. It's actually going to be delayed until 2:45, so you can come back then and hear her. All right, thank you very much.